This is TVA Fandemic, a podcast about real human issues brought to you by Dark Crazy Dark Knight.
Yeah, and admittedly, I feel like I'm such a I think I'm such a Marvel fanboy, not because I'm a fan, but just because the stuff they work on me so much. Those movies, just their moments, and that's why my funnest moments in this movie are more Marvel scenes where like he's teaching her how to make tea. He's like, no, don't do that. Hold on, you're gonna like that moment is like one of my favorites of this movie, and it's like a weird little Marvel moment. You're like, yeah, okay. Those are interesting, but we get to see more of Alfred and more of them play. I like that stuff. I wish we could see more of them being human. I love the slow motion stuff too, but I want to see. It's almost like I want 6 hours of this movie. I want to see more real moments.
Weirdly,
talking.
What makes it work is like stretching it out did actually make it palatable, because when you have all the badass stuff just boom, 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 like in Man of Steel, it's like at some point we just start punching things for an hour.
I mean, it works with all these characters again. I mean, we can touch on that in a second, but like the Falcon show, it's like there's action, but then it's just people talking for another 30 minutes. And you're like, I like this.
Yeah,
is
it
fun.
opens with
it's
a
like,
phenomenal action.
Yeah, it's like, this is fun.
Show.
I like both things, but I want to see, I like their interaction. I like when Bruce and Diana are interacting. I think this is good. I like, she's so charming, and he is, like, everybody, all these people are charming. Momoa is charming. All these people are charming together. It's like they can do it. They don't always have to be, like, loading onto some kind of carrier or something and, like, coming back or walking around, So, I don't know. I kind of would have taken a longer, like, segmented thing, actually, if you think about it. Because what's there is well done.
Watching all these people just talk was really nice. As you said, they were just charming people. They didn't need to be fighting for us to be interested in what they were talking about with each other.
Right.
And sometimes you find out more about each other when you are agreeing and finding what you are having common. And I guess that's building up the Diana and him relationship, which is part of Flashpoint. But
right.
Yeah, because he's supposed to be in it. Like, I saw an article, because Greg had mentioned something about Michael Keaton backing out of that movie, but I saw an article that it's not that he backed out, it's just that it's not confirmed yet. Like, he may or may not do it, which is unfortunate if he doesn't, because Michael Keaton playing his version of Batman in that Flash movie would be really fun. But I think they've definitely said that Ben Affleck will be in it as his version of Batman. So the Snyderverse does sort of live on. Some of these story elements that they've built up here are going to live on in that Flash movie.
I like mixing and matching. It works.
It's much better because when BVS came out and we're like, this is their vision for the rest of the DC movies? Because you're like, I don't want to be locked into this as the only version. But they're like, no, look, we got a Superman TV show. We got this Superman that might appear in these weird movies, and we're also developing a black Superman. Like, okay, now you're talking. Now you guys, like, we're making all these different versions of Superman.
Well, they have to. I think they've sort of realized that they have to stop trying to be Marvel. Let Marvel be Marvel, and just do your own thing. So rather than Marvel having their one like united vision that's coming together, just take whatever, take what you can, make something fun.
If you got some that work together. Keep it. But if it doesn't, don't drag the whole rest of the franchise down. They may have come up with something that will work because nobody can replicate the MCU. Like, so instead of trying, like, here's a model that might work. It's like, well, just make these movies, and if they do work together, then you have that shared universe. But stop doing these movies where, because this was the biggest problem with BVS, stop doing these movies with these massive exposition dumps that are just teasing other movies you want to make. Like, that's no fun because it doesn't go anywhere.
Right.
But if it's good and you can build on that, then continue to build on it.
Right. And I mean, it takes a special. It only works with Kevin Feige in that situation. I don't know why. It's like a miracle that it does. The person kind of understands. And they tried to do it with Zack Snyder, but that kind of didn't work out because he was doing it. I mean, even some of the stuff, even to the early Wonder Woman, has influence. It's like, and that was a different sort of movie.
Like, well, Zack Snyder has had some positive influence here. Yeah, bringing in the casting of all these characters
is great.
Was him, and he brought in people like Patty Jenkins and James Wan, for that matter. Like, we're following after the stuff that he built. Like Jason Momoa, Aquaman started with Zack Snyder.
And
he's had some positive impact here,
and both of those are different tones. And I mean, out in 1984 withstanding, that one's a little weirder, but like they both have, which That one's weird because it does break, but it doesn't matter anymore. It would break all continuity. It's like, remember the whole world like fell under this magic stone? Nobody talks about that anymore.
We all made magic wishes and nearly had a nuclear war, and then everything went back to normal.
I watched Red Letter Media did a nice review of the Snyder Cut, and they pointed out there's a bit in the Joss Whedon cut where Batman has a go at Diana because he's like, you should be as famous as Superman, and I've never heard of you.
Right.
When have you ever done anything before? And they just show bits of her saving people all the time, which in all of her movies she constantly does. So when people are like accusing her of like being underground for 100 years, it's like, maybe she just smashed the cameras, dude. Like, she's been clearly active this whole time.
But that's coming off of
Batman. Maybe you're terrible at this.
Well, that was also coming.
You never heard of me.
She says that in BVS though. Remember, she says she like disappeared for 100 years, and they're like, well, you obviously didn't though, because now we're changing that. But that's fine. Who cares?
Yeah, there's a couple of things like that that are a bit like, like we just had a whole scene of her saving a bank and exploding things. She's not really being quiet. You can't really yell at her right now. She's actively doing stuff.
Running, I'm not rampaging through the city, just machine gunning people, but I am trying.
Well, she is like, well, that's a little detail of these heroes. These are just, again, it's the badass meters up. I get it. Like, she just like murders those people and like vaporizes that dude.
It's
like,
a bit of overkill where like the guy's like finished shooting and he's not a threat right now, and she's like,
and she just vaporizes
I'll blow up
him.
the whole bank.
But also just, it's like also push all those rocks and all those guys out there. And then she turns around and the girl's like, those kids would be like, we just saw a guy get atomized in front of us.
When she stopped to talk to that little girl, she was like, what's wrong? And I'm like, that girl shit herself. That's what
she's like, what's wrong? And she's like, I want to be you. It's like, that would not, they would be screaming. You ever seen kids when something like that happened? They'd be screaming.
She's going to be a villain in the next movie.
Because I don't mind
killing. Like you.
Yeah, I don't mind the killing. I mean, most of the things. That's why even like, again, I'll mention the Falcon thing. They're killing people in that too. I don't mind. She didn't have to atomize.
Diana does that. Diana's really, and that's one of the interesting things about Diana that you lose when you make Superman grimdark as well. Is that Diana is okay with killing people when Superman and Batman are supposed to be the ones who are not okay with it, and it's actually a big plot point in the comics. When she does that, and they're all like, you can't kill people, and she's like,
yeah, see, that would be cool if she's the harder edge one. Well, yeah, see, that would be cool.
That actually works really well, and that's one of the things that works well with their characters is, like she said, different character dynamics coming together. And she's like, you gotta do what needs to be done. And she's a warrior, like she's about killing people.
Yeah, so 5,000 years she was trained to kill people with a sword, and then she stepped out in a world where everyone has guns. Thanks.
Yeah,
for 5,000 years, I've been studying with a sword. No one told us.
It's like somebody should have been.
They have airplanes.
In Wonder Woman 84, and she's like, no, Steve, you can't use a gun. You can't kill people. It's like, what are you doing?
Somebody should have been studying science this whole time so we can make bullets.
Yeah, exactly. Look, they're way ahead of us. They could have nuked the Themyscira.
Yeah.
At least Wakanda was technologically superior.
I don't know. Well, she also, that's the Marvel thing. She's basically Black Panther sort of too, because she comes from this lost. Like, that's what I don't get in this one. They keep talking about, like, I like how Steppenwolf is bringing it up. He keeps, I don't know if it's done on purpose, but all he does is just keep talking trash to her and not anybody else.
Yeah.
He talks trash to her the entire time.
Because he doesn't know the others at all, I guess.
Yeah, I guess he knows the
I don't even know who Aquaman is, but at least
he's his kid.
Her deal.
But then at the end, like they keep doing hints of like they kind of make it on that side and this side. Like, can she not go back there? It's just like a geographical place. It's not like the Lost Island or something.
But like Steve just landed there, so.
Yeah, and they all just went in and came out, and they're obviously geographically.
But when she left, did her mom was like, "You can't come back if you leave."
Was that the deal?
Is that what her mom said? It's been a while since I watched it, but I seem to remember her mom saying something like that.
It just seems weird.
Yeah, why? Because it's. I mean, she can even make things invisible now. She's getting Zeus's powers.
And to that sense, everybody goes.
Anyone can come and go. She can.
Yeah, this has like an Avengers sort of ending where everybody's like, well, that's done. Let's go off. And it's like, well, if something happens again. In this case, they know something's going to happen again. They know Darkseid is coming.
They saw him.
Yeah.
They saw him through that hole.
I was like, shouldn't they be just like doing some, like gathering a bunch of like Bruce Wayne's in there sleeping late. He's like, okay, man, Martian Man or whatever. Like he has his attitude with him. Like,
I still have these dreams where me and Joker are making out sometimes.
You woke me up at the worst part of it.
It's like, I think those are just dreams, and I think you need to address why you're having them.
Yeah, they were still doing that because it's like, I love how this movie refuses to tie up points. It's like it refused to, like, for the moment, because he's sitting there, it's like, I had a vision of Barry from the future, and Lois is the key. And then Wonder Woman's like, yeah, so she is the key. I mean, that's for this movie. He's like, no, it's something else, something darker.
Something darker. Like,
like,
why would you? Of course it is.
Wrap it up for this movie. Just say, okay, yeah, that probably makes sense. Sure, that's right. Lois is the key. That's like, it's like, no, it's a deep, mysterious threat. They just, yeah, whatever. I don't know if it's him or Christina. They just don't know how to make, and they did this with Rise of Skywalker too. They just don't know how to make anything interesting. It like, where's like the clothes of something that could be interesting, you know? And it's like, this is interesting, right? Or like even like, these aren't egregious. Even like Dana going into the temple and putting the arrow in the temple, and it just specifically talks about Darkseid. That's the whole thing. Which is, so I get it, but it's like, it's a very just like very basic what happened there. I was like, why was this even needed?
Yeah,
it's like,
and her VO.
It's like, this looks like Indiana Jones, right? This looks kind of cool. You're like, I guess it's like
she just fully narrates this exact thing that happened.
She knows all the stuff. It's like, yeah,
everybody's
why wouldn't she
CGI.
already know
Even
that
the
story?
normal.
Surely her parents would have told her that story.
it's just.
I'm sure told that already.
But you understand that's like
'cause
quintessential.
she knows everything. When she's telling Batman, it's not like, I just read this magic scroll. Like, she seems to know it. Like, so
that would have been a great thing to give to Lois.
Right. That led Lois, exactly. Lois uncovering these weird things, and Lois being in that temple would have been like, oh, what is this? This is cool. Like,
cool.
oh, this is. She could have investigated this thing. Yeah, it would have been great.
Like Wonder Woman could have found Lois there even.
And another thing,
Had a great
the
goal.
element of a mystery, like they just know they're attacking and they move. I know it feels like we need to add like 3 more hours to this to make this work. But I like the way Joss Whedon, I don't know if the scene's totally executed perfectly, but in the first scene with Batman where he's on the rooftop and he catches that guy, but he just does it so he can be afraid, so he can lure them in. And it feels like there's like a mystery that's being solved. Mm-hmm. You know, like he's being a detective.
Because he has
like,
to uncover what.
And he's like, these things have been
are.
cited, and they, you know, they get attracted to fear, so I'm going to catch these people and hang them off the building. And like, it makes sense. Something about that is Batman-y that I like. It's like, oh, this is pretty cool. I like this. I like that mystery thing.
Yeah, I mean, at the beginning, it had been like Batman and Lois like trying to figure out what's going on next.
Right.
Rather than just like spending forever going to the singing town and finding Aquaman for no reason other than to say, maybe we'll need you later. Like, that could have been part of it. It could have been like, hey, you're an Atlantean. Maybe you could tell me something.
Yeah, that would have made more sense if he sort of learned, because he met Wonder Woman in BVS. If you're going to introduce these elements, then you could sort of move the story along for the fact that he could learn these things instead of saying, well, Lex Luthor had a hard drive full of super beings and I have all these nightmares, so I'm assembling a team. It's like, well, what? If she knows the history of all this kind of stuff, that would make more sense, and she could be the one to tell him about Atlanteans and all this stuff. And that's why, like you're saying, that's what leads him to Aquaman. And then, you know, the fact that he's Batman and they keep tabs on things. Why does Lex know all this stuff about metahumans? But Batman has never even heard of Wonder Woman.
They go out. He goes out. He spends the most effort to get Aquaman. I mean, because it looks cool in the environment and it looks really cool and it's foreign and you know,
he came over that mountain.
All this stuff. But I was like, he just saw this that video of Aquaman. There's a guy coming out and going with the camera and going back like, how's he gonna help you, man? Like, Cyborg guy looked way better. I was like, or the Flash kid that's in your city, you know, an hour away.
Why
it's like,
did you go to Aquaman?
I gotta have the one that can talk to fishes.
He's just like a mermaid or something. They also missed a big joke there too. That like felt like where he comes in and they're coming to the thing and
vicious jokes.
Well, where he comes in and Cyborg goes, "Well, I talk to intelligent machines," and then there's no mention of him talking to fishes. I was like, they gotta mention that when he's saying he talks to machines. So it's like nothing. It's as if we don't care about talking to fish.
No, that doesn't matter.
Well, that kind of goes into the whole thing. I heard another somebody saying it kind of is apt. This is Zack Snyder's kind of style is no self-awareness at all. This is all straightforward. This is straightforward.
And that's why
look how serious this is.
Joss Whedon stuff, because Joss Whedon is all self-awareness. That's his thing. So they're trying to mesh those two.
Totally different people. I mean, Joss Whedon invented that modern almost sense of that. self-ironic, like a self-reflective statement, then self-deprecating, then seriously, like, it's like, this is the exact opposite of this. This is full on. Yeah. Look at this thing.
Like there's the moment.
Look at it. It's amazing.
He's like there singing, and then like she picks up the jumper, and we're like, sniff the jumper, and she does it, and we're like, no, that was a joke.
Like, if it's Joss Whedon, you'd have seen it cut to Bruce going, all right, and like he just like walked away. It's like, no, there's like, okay.
Or she would have gone like smelled it and gone like, oh, fishy, like.
This is so epic. Everything. It's just.
It just takes itself very seriously, and that's part of the whole masculinity thing you were talking about.
Yeah, it's a very well, and again, we won't dive into this too, but it ties into some of the more toxic ends of his fans and everything too. It's like it attracts people, and it ties into. There's articles about this too, and I won't even share that too. That how this all leads into political movements and all that stuff. But it's the same way with Rise of Skywalker. That. Our side, or the Last Jedi, that's where this thing started. We like the more reflective Luke, all these other things. Their big problem is Luke not being very masculine, not there and being a badass. So it's like it's a very different take, and you have different fans that are kind of. And again, I like I don't mind. I love 300. I like a good masculine thing. It's fun to watch. That 3-2 punch of getting stabbed thing and decapitated and like the head and like it's badass. Like just send him the body back. It's like that's just awesome. That's just really cool. Yeah. Now again, it's 11. I don't watch these because these are interesting characters. You want to see more of it. So that's what. So it all ties together. That's the biggest thing I came up with. It's like it's just that's what it's a. It's like that's the double-edged sword. It's there for a reason, but it also is not interesting to watch all the time, and it also attracts all the other stuff that's involved with him, that's wrapped up with this whole thing.
You're never going to get that human element because they're not self-aware. It's like, these are the guys who are never in on the joke. Because they are.
Yeah, it's just like
this guy. It's like, does this guy not?
It's like
see
being
himself?
Drax, right?
But that's like, because the guys Zack Snyder is one of those people who's like working out as a religion to me kind of people. It's like, so you're not seeing how ridiculous this flex is in these characters. So you never can sort of, you can never have them be self-aware.
It is, but it's nice to go to that world for a bit and just be there for a bit. Like you wouldn't want it every day. But like, it's nice.
I don't mind seeing it. Like I said, if there are other people making Superman projects, you could let Zack Snyder do his thing forever.
I like this take on it.
If they're going to get Michael B. Jordan to be Superman in a movie,
I'm really interested in that.
I want to see that. And then I've got a TV version of Superman that can't punch for an hour because they don't have the budget, so he gets to be the sort of human
dad. It's a Friday Night Lights Superman. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, so I'm down with that. Like, if we're gonna get different versions of the character as we do with the comics, then I'm fine with it.
And that's why it's so weird to hear them like, well, there are people. It's so funny because Zack Snyder ended up pissing off a bunch of these fans the night before or the night it came out because he like denounced some of these groups that are like supported him, so then they got all mad at him and everything. But like the people were getting pissed because like Warner Brothers says this isn't canon, the other one's canon. I was like, are we past canon at this point? Who cares?
Multiverse.
Yeah. Who cares about anything canon?
They say in it that like in it, Mira comes out and she's like, I'm an orphan, and then in the next movie in Aquaman, she's got a dad. Like
she's got an English accent in this movie too.
She's got a British accent here, yeah. Like it's a different interpretation
and different hair and everything. It's like
on their canon and that sort of thing. It's like you just need to let that stuff go. This isn't. Don't take it too serious.
Out of all of them, the Aquaman one is the one that ties into Aquaman. He's like, I'm gonna go find my dad. He just takes off in a pickup truck, and I think we see him in the back of a pickup truck, like at the beginning of the Aquaman movie. It's like, yeah, that makes sense.
One thing that Zack does do well between these movies is they really do flow into each other very well. You can see where one ends, the other one comes in. Like there's not like what's been happening in the last 5 years or anything like that. Like we know what's happening between movies. They flow very well together.
Yeah, and like I said, I would not mind if they were able to explore that now, because we have other spaces where people have other interpretations. So it's not setting the tone for every superhero movie. They're actually in a good place because they can have the best of both worlds, like they do. Like, well, let's just make another version of that Justice League movie, and people are like, well, what about, you want to do a director's cut of Suicide Squad? It's like, no, and I'll tell you why. Because we're making a whole new Suicide Squad movie. We don't want to confuse. We already are rebooting that.
And that's not the same
Snyder
situation.
Cut sort of builds up what we're trying
this
to do
one,
with some of these other
he literally had. There's literally 3. I mean, there's literally like 2.5 hours at least of footage just never even people saw. So it's like, yeah, it's worth it for this because it's like.
And I'm glad he got the chance to do this.
Yeah, I think it's great.
As a creator, like losing that movie and in the circumstances in which he lost that movie, for him to get to come back and finish it and get his vision out there, like good for him, like great.
And dedicate it to his daughter.
Yeah.
Right.
Like,
Yeah, I mean, even if he put in that terrible, terrible, terrible hallelujah at the end.
Oh, it's such a bad version of that song. It's just like
man, this is the thing.
Roadie croon.
I was thinking about that. It's like coming from Zack Snyder. I don't know why he keeps using Hallelujah. He's the one person I gave credit for because of Watchmen. Watchmen's actually a great movie too. I like Watchmen. Watchmen is the only movie. He's the only person ever to use Hallelujah in a sex scene where it's appropriate because that's what that song's about. Every other where in the world,
I didn't
they
know that until he used it in Watchmen.
Yeah, and you listen to the words of that song. It's about being in love.
Like, that's what that song's about.
Like, remember when I moved in you? The whole point of this is about a love affair. And they'll play it at like baseball games, and I was like, "What are y'all doing?" That's like this is not they'll play it at like religious things. Like this
people think it's a religious thing.
Yeah.
That's why they play it and everything.
But I was like, you use it properly, but then he started using it for this. It's like I don't understand now.
Well,
I'm confused now. Why are you using the song again?
It said that song was his daughter's favorite.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And that's why.
So I can understand why it's there. It's just
we don't do it in the trailer for
that
this.
version's hard.
Put it at the end.
That's the
yeah.
problem.
Yeah.
But you know what would have been great? Jeff Buckley right there would have been a great version to put it right there.
I love the
It's a
Jeff
great
Buckley
version. It is very
that
somber
would
and have been
fun.
perfect.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know.
It's still.
But all in
fun.
all, we liked it. We were happy.
It's
I was
nice.
pleasantly. I thought it was very nice.
He gets to do the movie that he meant to do. There's a lot of fans out there that really are enthusiastic about this, and not necessarily toxic fans. Just regular
those toxic fans are sort of pissed
who wanted
right now.
to see
So
this.
they kind of got all excised.
They're
right?
perpetually pissed. Who cares?
That's their thing.
It's like, good lord, stop. Why? Never mind. I don't want to get into perpetually.
You can't make me wear a mask, Sean. Okay?
Yeah, I don't. I can't even. That stuff. But yeah,
I'm tired of your identities.
that whole that leads us to a whole different thing that we're not qualified to address. But for those fans who in earnest did enjoy the Snyderverse and would like to have seen his vision, they get that too.
It's a home run too.
And outside, you just you like to see someone have a real life redemption, that they get to do the version of something they wanted to do, and it's a win-win, because if you didn't like this and you didn't like the other one, you didn't lose anything for this existing.
Yeah, I don't know anybody who's a big fan of these, so I'd like to talk, here. But the people that you would just from podcasts and stuff they listen to, that felt the same way do about all of these. They're like the same reaction as us. So I think that's a success. You won people over that were just giving up on these. I'm like, yeah, I think this is good. It's a good positive cap. Let's end it. Stop it, maybe. Like
to dump
do
it
some
all
other
out
stuff.
as
Do
a
some fun
4-hour.
stuff.
Like, they sort of didn't allow that ecosystem to feed them in the way that a Marvel show, because when they were going to do this, because I remember how excited I was that they were going to do episodically. It's like, we're going to do it week for week. This is going to be another Mandalorian. It's going to be great. And they're like, no, we're going to dump it all 4 hours at once. It's like, crap. Well, we can't do a week for week where we talk about a movie everybody saw. And every YouTuber in the world right now has the same problem. They're like, we are working on a Justice League video, okay?
Well, they do at least they cut it in parts, because they have done cut. I've seen that they do it in the parts that it comes out in.
And people are starting to do it, but you didn't feed that ecosystem, so it can't feed you to the way that it could have, by just dumping it all out that way. So. And that might have been a good decision, because if this was a week for week and it was just a longer version of the theatrical cut, it would have been like, okay, so in this episode we really don't have a whole lot. There's some cyborg stuff that was more than what we saw, but that was pretty much, otherwise it's exactly, and the buildup would be, is this whole movie just going to be the movie we saw, just stretched out? I was led to believe they reshot. Like, there were scenes in there that I was shocked to find out were not Joss Whedon scenes. Like, you're telling me when they're in a cemetery digging up Superman's grave, that was in the original cut?
Yeah.
Because I just assumed that was the Joss Whedon. That's a Joss Whedon as hell. It looks like a scene from Buffy.
There's actually different dialogue too. Yeah.
Much different dialogue. There's like a weird fist bump bit in the Joss Whedon version where they're like Cyborg is also like angry at the Flash.
But then there's,
but instead of that, they have nice dialogue where they're happy.
Yeah, and there's some of the Superman stuff. Like, yeah, I like the sentiment of the opening scene of Superman, but again, it kind of tied to Lois more than. But the one where they're on the farm, it doesn't change it that much from what really. You know, they reshot the him in the field thing on the green screen and with the mustache thing.
There's a couple of bits where they point out on Red Letter Media where it's the same thing, they've just used a different take. And you're like, what is this, this slightly different take the directors have used? Is that because each director thought one was better, or because one director didn't want to use the one the other one had used?
Well, Zack Snyder swears that he
hadn't seen it.
He didn't watch the Joss Whedon version and wasn't using anything that Joss Whedon shot. So if that's true, then he just used what he thought worked and it didn't base it on the other. I don't know if I fully believe that all the way, but
there's some stuff that I missed.
If it's true, then
I missed a little bit of the Superman stuff, but I do miss. I like the scene where I thought that was a good moment for them. The Flash. I mean, some stuff's not super executed well, but I like the save one person little speech he gives to Barry.
Yeah, that was. I
like that scene.
And there's a moment on the plane where he's talking to Alfred about Superman, and he says, he had a job.
Right. He says he fell in love.
Than me.
That's a great scene too.
He was a part of the world. That was a good scene. If I was going to make a supercut, I would try to rescue one or two of those moments. Most of it you couldn't, because most of this stuff, the stuff that Zack Snyder did is superior. It's better.
Yeah, I mean, I
like the bit with the Superman and the Flash right at the ending having a race. That was cute.
Yeah, I mean, it's silly, but I enjoy it.
But this is a different world, though. This doesn't exist in this tone of movie.
Yeah.
They're too serious about stuff. It's
But yeah, so there was still stuff from the Joss cut that was good, but most of the time it was superior in the other one.
And it's just the tonal consistency. It's you can't cut away and do a Joss Whedon style gag, and some of the gags that he likes are a little unfortunate.
Yeah, it's the same thing he did in Avengers.
Like
he just
the Wonder
reused
Woman
the same
one?
gag.
Yeah, which he had already used in Ultron.
Yeah.
You like this gag better than...
And Ultron,
this works better than it worked.
If your lead actress is saying this gag is very bad and I won't film it, maybe you need to put your ego away for a second and say, maybe I need to look at whether I need this gag, instead of screaming at someone else and making them do it.
Yeah, whatever happened to this...
for Zack Snyder, because say what you will, the cast loves Zack Snyder. The people that work with him...
They were all super behind this cut.
Love him. And he got along with him and bonded with them. And they all... they didn't all say so, but none of them seemed to like Joss Whedon.
But that's what's weird to me, because I always hear that and but then you have some Joss Whedon cast that do love him. It feels like the Firefly cast loves him. It feels like the Avengers cast loves him. I've never heard. So it's is he just not happy in some sets or sometimes? When he's maybe I was
there's so much controversy coming out with the bullying of Charisma Carpenter and that sort of thing. That
there are some of those people have come forward.
Who played Buffy's little sister said that there was...
No, yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's heard. I've heard about. There's some casts.
There's some really... And then Anthony Stewart Head's come out and said, I'm so shocked, I never saw any of that.
That's the way it was. For Firefly, they were I'm supportive of everybody. I can't remember if it was Nathan Fillion or Alan Tudyk. They were I never saw that kind of behavior, but I support all the people that came forward.
And then people in his writer's room were saying that he likes to break people down. So maybe it's a power dynamic for him. He seems to be
when he feels the most out of control.
Yeah, if he feels like he's in charge, then he's a good guy. That's a personality type that we're all familiar with. Well, if he feels like he's in charge, then he's a good guy, and if not, then he just tries to wreck you.
That meshes with a lot of the stuff that came out when his wife divorced him, with her statement about how he sort of got this level of power and it sort of went to his head and he started being... sleeping around or whatever. I mean, obviously we don't know the truth of a lot of these situations.
Such a shame.
But
I love his writing so much, but it's such a shame that he's a creep.
It attracts with someone who's maybe a nerdy guy growing up and didn't have much power, and then he gets this power and he doesn't... I mean, now he's this super powerful director guy and he's got all of this stuff. He's got hot chicks. He's got all of these control, and then there'll be like one person who isn't within his control, like the guy who played Spike, who like backed him against a wall and like shouted at him like because he was
I read
like that.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of stuff like that you think it's obviously somebody who has some issues that.
That's just a shame.
Express themselves. Yeah, and he's a good writer, and he's made some of like my favorite stuff. Buffy's one of my favorite programs, and so much of that, wonderful feminist stuff. And then you go behind the scenes. I mean, yes, it's impossible not to see that a lot of the stuff that he excised from Justice League was the women and the people of color.
Well, you start to see that. You can't not see that bleed over even in the stuff you did like of his. Like when Ultron came out, there was a lot of backlash against it. And I was like, I think those people are overreacting. But now, you're like, in retrospect, you're like, yeah, some of this stuff is terrible. like the Black Widow stuff in Ultron is awful. It didn't seem as bad at the time to me, but now, like in this context, you're like, yeah, it's a pretty bad way to treat that character. Just attach her to a male character.
And that really makes a lot of this stuff really difficult because, like, we are talking on one hand about Zack Snyder's sometimes toxic masculinity, and on the other hand, we've got this performative feminist who, when you really look at what they're doing, some of it's none of it is perfect. And I guess how much do we expect our creators to be this way, and how much of it bleeds over into the stories they tell, and it's really complicated.
Well, and it shows you that nobody's a monolith too. Like you would think, well, Joss Whedon, he's this nerdy guy made good, and he's a feminist, and all the good liberal stuff, and so we give him the benefit of the doubt, and you find out now he was actually a monster.
Well, that's the thing too. That the movies have nothing to do with how they're like Zack Snyder just likes to do this, and he might like the workout thing, but from all accounts, he's like a really great guy, like a nice guy.
And behind the scenes, the women he's worked with,
everybody, and it's like so it's like funny how like you could like the work they do kind of signal something else, or you could be virtue signaling in Joss Whedon's part, and then behind the scenes they're not like
he makes this hyper masculine, some would say, underlying homosexual tension movies with his wife.
Right.
So we don't have to try and read things into it.
Well, all that masculine stuff has nothing to do with gender, too. To me, it's more like kind of it is masculine on a spectrum, if that's all a spectrum, you know what I mean? Not even to say too male, but just like this is very masculine energy. Yeah. So it's weird. So it's interesting how that kind of... I just think it's interesting from a cultural standpoint. He might not be like that at all, but it does attract certain people to him too.
Fans,
it's like that wouldn't necessarily he would agree with or have anything to do with it. So it is interesting. Like it's
and there's only so much
interesting part of the culture. You
can't really fault the creator.
It's not his 100%
fault. For the audience they attract. They have to remain aware of that because like you have to make sure what you're saying to your audience. But
that's the lesson we learned with Star Wars.
People like your work, like that doesn't like because there's white supremacists that like Star Wars.
Well, that's the lesson we learned with Star Wars.
Your mind.
Star Wars didn't like paint itself as masculine at all. It's a pacifist story, the Return of the Jedi at the end, but it's just so big. So if you have everybody like there's a certain percent of your population that are white supremacists that like Star Wars. There's a certain percent, like it's just these things on this massive level, these franchises like that, they're gonna have all sorts of fans, that like it for different reasons, that'll pull out somehow.
Yeah, you can't really be responsible for who your fans are. You can just be responsible for what you're saying.
Or how you behave around, how you treat other people too. That's the big thing.
I think you can't stay agnostic if you find out that people are interpreting your work a certain way. Like you have to examine that, but you're not necessarily responsible for it.
Yeah,
it just depends. Like everybody comes. It blows my mind. We did not used to have these kind of discussions.
Right.
Like with the politics of gender weren't prevalent in Star Wars 10 years ago. And now it's like a big contingent of the fandom. You're like, well, we have to be careful because there's like a contingent of the fandom that will just lose their mind over their perception of gender portrayal in Star Wars. And they won't say that's what it is, but it always seems to happen in those lines. Like the Kathleen Kennedy critics are like, you have focused on this person for what seems like arbitrary reasons, because
not arbitrary.
Can't name. Well,
yeah.
No, but
I mean, well, to tie into,
you're saying that you're not doing it based on the fact that she's a woman, then the reasons seem pretty arbitrary. Because you don't know the CEO of any other company that produces content that you like.
Yeah, Kevin Feige's not the CEO. Kevin Feige's not the CEO. It's whoever the other guy is. I don't even know. So it's like. Yeah, to tie into, for a funny anecdote, to tie into what happened with Zack Snyder, he wanted the thing, and I guess that Geeks and Gamers is a YouTube channel. That guy was one of those Last Jedi. I hated it. Who is this? And I looked it up, and I was like, oh, I hate this guy. I don't like this guy at all, because it's one of those channels. Apparently, in these past few years since Last Jedi, these guys have just grown. If you look at all their first videos, it's like Last Jedi is abomination, and now they just grown in these communities with all sorts of people, all sorts. I mean, you can't say it's not necessarily. To me, the bigger thing, this kind of ties into Josh Whedon thing. The bigger, not to get too serious, bigger than race, bigger than a lot of stuff. Most of the time is misogyny. Because it can happen, and women in those groups can accept it too. I'm like, they're fine, everybody's fine here. I'm like, they're not acting fine to you, like. And if you look at that, he basically called them out saying, I don't want to be associated with Geeks and Gamers, because it was a charity stream and they had sponsors. He's like, I already talked about this. We're supposed to take that down. And he kind of tied it to the shooting thing happening. And they then started, I saw some little headline on YouTube, all these live streams, like post-mortem about what happened. Because he basically called them out on their stream. And they all didn't say anything, and they're like, then afterward, this is why I was getting that masculine idea, because afterwards they're like, well, I would have said something, but I was trying to be, and then everybody kept coming on, and it's fun to watch bullies turn on each other, because they were but then they kept going, this is all about, and all these people have individual channels, and I was like, what is their channel? And I kept checking, they're all the same thing. And then they're like, Geeks and Gamers community is all about, love and about sharing kindness. And I look at his, what are the uploads? Let's look at and it's all videos of Kathleen Kennedy with, red eyes. And so I was like, yeah, this is all about love, I'm sure. It's like, why is everyone these negative about, or it's Kelly Marie Tran? There are all these women and all these other things. And it's like, are big.
Yeah,
they hate Black Superman's a big deal, too. Yeah.
But it just, when you look at the history of them just not liking that character, right, it's always the same. You can see a pattern forming.
Right. I mean, to listen to us talk about how much we hate BVS, and we're saying, Zack Snyder, do your thing. We'd like to see more from you. I don't hate him. I don't like what he does. I like what he does. It's not a great movie.
Even when we've talked about this before, but even when we were at the very height of our dislike for BVS, where it's like, oh, I just can't stand anything. We talked about it endlessly. We're not tweeting him.
Yeah.
We're not sending him
don't
DMs
attack the creators. Don't
kill
attack
yourself.
the creators for their work if you don't like it. We can call out Joss Whedon if people have said he's a racist or if he's a bully. You can call them out for that. But we don't need to tweet him and say, I don't like Buffy,
Right.
It's just rude.
But yeah, it's like, what? Yeah, because the whole...
Be excellent to each other.
Yeah, it's just...
Try to find, the love or whatever.
So yeah, it's just it's a weird... We live in such a weird world now, because all these people are commenting on everything. So it is, like you said, John, the world's... I think it's changed fundamentally since Last Jedi, and there's a lot of political kind of articles that talk about that and how that ties into a lot of things, but
seems like it wasn't.
It's all tied to culture too. Culture ties into politics, ties into the general society thing now.
I think we're also more aware of it now than we used to be. Looking back on things like that Britney Spears documentary that came out, and we look back at how much hate people like Britney got back in the day, and it ties back into that culture of misogyny and stuff. But back in the day, nobody called anyone out for that, and it was horrible the way she was treated. Mm-hmm. But now we seem to have, maybe with the internet, maybe with the way that we group think, is we have a lot more accountability for that sort of thing. And there's a lot more
I think it is better
for that behavior.
I think we probably are getting better at recognizing the bad behavior. We don't quite know what to do with it, but we are getting better at least saying, whoa, I think, because what was the Harry Potter character who was it was an Asian character,
Cho Chang,
but nobody knew it reading the books, even though it was an Asian name.
Oh.
But when they cast her with an Asian actress, people lost their minds.
They did the same thing in Hunger Games with Rue, and they in the book they specifically say she's got brown skin, and they're like, oh, we don't want a brown person.
And that wasn't because she just came out recently, the actress from Harry Potter, saying, I had read that stuff, but my agents and publicists just told me to pretend I hadn't seen it if someone asked me about it. And so we just acted like it wasn't there. But it was happening back then too, all this racist stuff coming from the fandom. But come on,
her name's Cho Chang. You didn't think she was Asian?
Well, it just shows you
a name that was basically
like,
Asian.
In their head. In their head, their whole worldview is like all the people are of a certain race, and that's okay. But when that's pointed out to you, when you realize that you have that, instead of pushing back, you should be asking yourself, "Oh, why did I assume that? Why did I have to assume that? Why was that a thing?" Like, you should be able to introspect, and
that's why
hopefully some people are.
That's why the push for diversity and to get different representation out there is so important, because when people see Asian characters, they won't be so, or any character, trans characters, disabled people, anything, they won't be so like, oh, this is weird, and then they will not react that poorly in the real world.
That's why you need someone in the writer's room when people are floating ideas. You need somebody in the writer's room to go, that's a terrible idea. Like,
that's why you need diversity.
Was it Gucci that made that blackface shirt? It was like a turtleneck. When they pulled the black turtleneck over their face, it had red lips on it. Right. People were like, what are you doing? And they're like, oh, that's not what we didn't know. It's like, yeah, but that means no one in the decision-making process at your company is in any way associated with somebody that would know how like the first time we saw this, we were like, you don't even test this stuff on people who would have said, what the fuck? Right. Over something that's obviously bad.
Every writer's room, every company needs the what the fuck person.
Yeah. That's where real representation comes from. Back in the old days, like, Stan Lee and them, those guys would write like characters with ethnic origins into the comics, but they weren't great because they didn't know that culture,
which is exotic,
but it was a step in the right direction. Right.
But
that's why even to this day, like, every superhero has a black best friend. There's like Iron Man has a black best friend.
I mean, all that
Captain
stuff
America has a black best friend. It's a step in the right direction for the time, but it's weird now that they're still there as the guys who are in the TV shows because they were the best friend of the guys who are in the movies.
That's a perfect segue to Falcon and the Winter Soldier, because now I think that show is addressing that idea. They're not shying away from race, and the idea is like, wait a second, I'm not the sidekick anymore, but I don't feel. Does everybody feel uncomfortable? Like, he himself is this kind of put upon this thing, or he doesn't feel like he's ready, and then like. You're kind of getting the undertone, the subtext, that that's what the government thinks too, because they just gave away his shield.
And he's working for them. He's a superhero working for the government already.
Right.
So you would think it would make perfect sense for them to say, Sam, why don't you be Captain America? But instead, they went and got a guy who looks like
he's white.
He looks like the Land of Confusion version of Steve Rogers.
Right. It's Russell Wyatt too, though. Yeah.
But everyone's talking about how punchable his face is.
His jaw is like not that strong enough at the bottom there to match Steve's. Like, doesn't look right.
But it makes him a perfect like perversion of that idea of Captain America. But they say, see, he's the right kind of guy to be Captain America, though. Our kind of guy, if you understand. Well,
I mean, but it totally works with the time. And not to get political again, but it's like that kind of thing, and straw man patriotism and all this other stuff, like what that is and how fake it is. Like, I'm interested to see where they go with that, because this has been it's
going to be a lot of fun.
It doesn't seem like they're purposely digging into that. I mean, because also they're digging into. I mean, him talking to Rhodey there, and the subtext of that scene too is like, well, Rhodey's like, come on, man, that's like, you have to do this, but you can't. Nobody's gonna give this to you. You just gotta kind of claim it. That's sort of the thing. It's like,
you can't say you're not good enough to be Captain America, because there's plenty of people that would say that for you.
Right.
You have to step up and prove those people wrong, whether you think that should be your job or not.
Right.
And that is an interesting, because it's not the same story at all, but it's the same. Those are the same themes that they played with in the comics when Sam became Captain America, and they had like all these hashtags of like "Give back the shield," like "You shouldn't be Captain America." And what's funny is we have an opportunity that we'll probably see in that toxic fandom, where we get to see the real life reaction to this show as it gets too political.
Right. I'm sure they'll say, I'm sure that's going to come out, because now we're hitting.
They always do that. Like, it's too political. It's like life is political. If you don't think it is, you're not looking around.
Yeah, you didn't think it was political when the white guy was making these points.
Yeah, like, all this stuff doesn't make any sense too. Because I mean, to their credit, like those when I did a deep dive that night with the Zack Snyder stuff, and that they have all sort. I mean, there's all different diversity. There's men, women, all people of color and stuff in there. But they all have the same opinions. If you look at all their YouTube things, they're all sort of like anti-maskers and all these things. Like it's even tied into real life politics and stuff too. A lot of these people say
that's the scary thing.
But if you look at that, they even the ones that are like these, African American guys in there hate the Black Superman idea because they call it tokenization stuff. I was like, no matter what you think people's intentions are, if every other version was not that, don't we like? That's why like when Rey or any of these people in Star Wars and they're like, it's just a woman, of course. I was like, but it's the first one. Why can't we just try this without people having a fit about it? I was like, don't you think inherently having that difference in Superman would be sort of interesting? Like, we've already talked about why that's interesting as a character move, because it's a person even more of an outsider in American culture, especially if it's in the 50s and 60s, coming
especially
up and going.
He is raised as
a
farmer in Kansas.
Yeah,
a really interesting.
There's adopted black son, and it's like that makes Superman even more Superman when he has more reason to not like some people, but he does, like humanity and that's very powerful.
Some guy in a bar poured a beer on me. It's like, that's a sort of privilegey thing to be pissed off about.
Yeah, but he's like he's
what
a
if
good
you had
looking
like real issues of people like you're like I could knock these guys' heads off.
Right.
like
real racism and oppression.
But
imagine
but it's
that.
going to be viewed very differently if a black guy knocks someone's head off.
Right.
Well,
but his restraint is the big deal.
When his father is like, look, like all of those arguments that Pac had in Man of Steel would be so intensified.
Right.
Like, look, you have to work very hard for this world to accept you.
Right.
Like the metaphor
all that
there.
stuff is interesting.
Bridgerton addresses this. To bring it back to another classic bit of TV. In Bridgerton, there's these couple of black characters, and one of them says to another one, like, does the speech like we have to work twice as hard to get half as much because of our color, because of the way people perceive us. We have to work twice as hard. Bridgerton was rubbish, by the way, but I liked it.
Yeah, I didn't gravitate to that show. I didn't feel like it had much to offer me.
It's a bit rapey.
But that's what in those cultures they always jump on the thing that's like, I was like, I would get it that's why I never said the phrase. I was like, even if we made a next 100 of these movies with female or people of color leads, we're not going to match the ones that have already been made to make it equal. So it's like, what is your deal, guys? Like, it's like everything's not the something, because the whole point of these decisions is that it does match everybody, and I just don't.
It's such a bad faith argument, though, because it's like, at the one hand, you're saying that people shouldn't push for this kind of inclusion because it shouldn't be a thing. But then on the other hand, anytime that there is any diversity in one of these things that you like, it's just an affront to everything that you want to see. It's like, so which is it? It's like you're saying no one should push for diversity, but even if it were to happen by accident, you have a problem with it.
Right.
So where is this where is this inclusion supposed to organically happen? If every time it pops up, like even in ways they didn't predict, like I would have never predicted the backlash against Kelly Marie Tran in The Last Jedi, and it's still odd to me,
right?
Because this is not that
character,
and she's not that prominent a character.
Yeah.
It's not like she's the Luke Skywalker stand-in like Rey. I mean, I don't agree with it, but I at least understand why those people feel threatened, because a protagonist role has been reassigned, just like they did with Finn. It's like, I just don't understand why one of the characters has to be a black guy. I just don't understand why that matters to you.
Yeah.
As a problem.
Why shouldn't it be a black guy? Why shouldn't it be a woman? It shouldn't be an issue. It's good.
Yeah, like what is that? Yeah.
Like every character Like we have to dominate at every level.
The movies and the themes in that movie that I think a lot of people were also affronted by. Like they didn't want that politics in their Star Wars, and I think she was the focus point because they couldn't be angry at the other parts. I think there was a lot of misplaced rage, and it went on to her because of the racism.
Maybe because they couldn't attack Rey because the whole thing was propped up on Rey. So they attacked this character, and it worked because she got basically reduced from the final film. Like she's in the final movie for what, a minute?
Yeah.
So the backlash against that minor character was successful, whereas they knew they couldn't. I feel so
bad for Kelly Marie Tran. She's so good. And I'm glad that she's getting into doing more stuff now.
Yeah, I think that was like probably the most disappointing thing they did in Rise of Skywalker, and their explanation just made it worse. It was like, well, we just thought she'd be the character that'd be there to speak for Leia. It's like, that's not a good argument because that's a worse thing to do. Like, why is she the one? Why not have Finn stand there and parrot what the CGI of Leia is saying to give it credibility? No, you have... It's not a very good arc, but you have an arc for Finn. An arc that her character would have been perfect to accompany him on.
Right.
No, we made him a more appropriate girlfriend character. It's like, why is she more appropriate? Well, she's just looks more like the kind of person that would be with Finn.
Yeah.
No, I don't know. What do you mean? Like, I don't know. They just look better together as a couple, And that's the thing, when you start to actually question these people who are like, it's not racist, I just didn't like a character. It's like, what is it? Why didn't you like it? And they can't, there's not cohesive answers because they don't want to question themselves as to why they're thinking that. They just make up ideas and they make up this like, no, it's just because of the character. I just didn't like it because of the character. Well, and name me all the other situations where you didn't like a character and you just attacked the actor viciously.
Well, that ties in. Yeah, that ties into the thing that's the biggest issue. It's like we get on here and break apart stuff and talk about stuff we hate and talk about stuff we don't like or whatever. But we don't. This is just a movie. At the end of the day, that we walk away from, we say we didn't like this from a storytelling point of view because this, and this, blah blah blah. I hate that. This isn't some breakdowns like, now this is what you're on notice, Warner Brothers. Now let me tell you why. And we go into this. That's what they do in all these things.
It's a
like,
sense of entitlement.
That's exactly what I'm saying. It's like we own this stuff. You demand. They say it's a culture war for our childhoods with Star Wars. Like you don't own any. I think that's that's been the kind of vernacular of directors and like in the modern like 40, 50 years of saying like, well, when I put it out, the audience owns it. It's their stories. Like we should stop saying that. We should stop saying that. Well, these are movies that are out. You can have any kind of, you own your interpretation and what you want to do with it. I think the people that are making these movies though don't owe anything to anybody like with this stuff. These are companies making money.
There is a divide there. Like I think it's fair to say that once the artist releases the art that the audience owns it because
their interpretation.
It's disingenuous to try to reclaim a piece of art and recontextualize it because once you put it out there, you put it out there. But at the same time,
but they own the
whatever the audience's interpretation is doesn't necessarily feed back in when I'm making a sequel.
Right.
Like, well, I thought the movie was about this, so the sequel, and that's where we have to take that with the Rise of Skywalker too. It's like, well, I would have rather you gone in this other direction, and you didn't, but. You made the movie you made.
But what we do is we walk away and we're like, well, all right.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't want you to remake
shows.
Rise of Skywalker. It's like, we lost that one. We wanted a different thing from it, and it wasn't that different.
And we can make our own art. We do our own, like what I would have done, or we can make our own version of a Star Wars type one, or we can write our own comics. We can write our own books. If you're unhappy with the media that you're being given, make your own,
or just watch another one. There's so many. This is such a renaissance of good movies and TV. Like there's always something coming on. I had this when I was buying comics. It's like buying new comics. It was like, I wish the new comics were more like the old comics. It's like, well, Sean, you don't own every old comic that was ever made. If you want those, why don't you stop buying new comics and just buy old comics? That's what you enjoy. Instead of wanting them to make the new ones, it's like there's 1,000 issues of Superman.
Yeah, like
if you want to read about the old Superman, buy those. They're not all super expensive.
Right.
You can read these things. You can read direct. Like I'm always getting on Brooks, because he'll bring something up like, I saw a video about this. It's like, no, that's crap. You've got to curate your feed, world. Like, there's so much when people say that they don't get on social media or they don't like YouTube because it's all they see is stuff about this. It's like, you're curating that feed. If it's popping up, it's like it's based on things you already said you wanted. It's trying to feed you those things. Like, be a better steward of the what you consume.
I'm a big this is just in general, like I'm not saying people's opinions aren't worthy of stuff. I think movies and everything, they should be worth conversations. We're on here talking about it. We know each other. We're doing this. People that want to listen to because it's conversation. But I don't. This goes for politics too, but also especially even more so with movies and stuff. I just don't think it's constructed to have just a bunch of people arguing about what Kathleen Kennedy's intentions are. Why do we care? Like, what? Just take the movie that you got served, judge that movie. You don't need there's nothing into it unless you're some kind of, I don't know, you know what I mean? Like, I know there's room for criticism on levels of intentions and studio stuff, but these aren't journalists. These are people that are sitting on YouTube doing this stuff. It's like, why are we doing campaigns about? It's
always a bad
behind the scenes drama and all this stuff.
Like, they're not really basing that on anything they really know about Kathleen Kennedy or the situation.
Yeah, they're just saying, I heard there's some behind-the-scenes drama about. I was like,
yeah, but you guys are the ones who are spreading that shit. That's not coming from anything real.
It's just all this stuff is just a waste of time.
When we're talking about that sense of entitlement and the sense of entitlement to my opinion, there's also you're entitled to your opinion, but you're not entitled to force everyone else to agree with you. There's a big push for well, that's my opinion, so I'm allowed to.
It's sacrosanct.
Throw that on you,
right?
And I shouldn't have that changed. And it's like, you know what? It's good. Everybody gets to think their own thing.
Right.
But that doesn't have to impact the creator. That doesn't have to impact how other people enjoy the artwork.
Well, that's what John Oliver says. You don't get to have an opinion about a fact.
Right.
That's the problem. You're entitled to your opinion, but your opinion can't be offered as though it counters a fact.
Right.
Or in this case, it counters another opinion. You're entitled to think what you want to think.
But all that stuff, intention.
That's not beyond criticism. It's the weirdest thing ever when I offer a criticism and then I'm offended when it itself gets criticism. It's that's as hypocritical as I could possibly be, where I think, well, I said this thing and no one should dare try to tear that down. I was like, but that's precisely what you're offering into the universe.
Right. Yeah, it's just it's just the times we live in and stuff. I mean, we say this while we're sitting there recording a podcast, but I think most people really realize that people don't. It's just these opinions. I just don't think it's talking about stuff that's not even part of the text of the thing. I guess that can be used for some kind of deeper thesis about an artist's work after they're gone and, what their life had to do with what they were. But just in this real time and what the studio's thinking, I just find it very counterproductive when we start trying to think about people's intentions and beyond what we do when we don't have enough information. That'd be different.
You're trying to construct a narrative, but you don't actually know anything.
Right.
Most of what you think you know is just other people spreading rumors.
And it's our hearing one interview and hearing them make a joke about something or her make a joke about, they hate Brie Larson because she's her and Don Cheadle were making jokes in this press conference. Don Cheadle, he hates her. Look at him. They hate her. She's such a feminine. They all hate. It's and you watch the clip they're talking about, it's you guys are just this over the drag stuff. You guys would be boring to hang out with.
People look at what famous people do and overanalyze, and they're clearly that person hates that person because they looked at them like this. And
this is the 12th hour of their junket, and they're just all loopy and they're messing with each other and being funny with each other. It's no, you guys are weird. It's
settle down, people.